Hello and welcome everyone. Today in our webinar we're going to be talking about printing labels. This is sort of a two-part webinar on labels that we're doing. We've got today the first step of the labels screen, which is selecting who should have labels printed. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about how to set up what the labels actually look like, the Step 2 screen, selecting and creating label layouts. So again, today we're going to be talking just about selecting the people who are going to be included on a set of labels. And if you're following along in our workbooks, you'll find this information in membership 203, pages 2 through 5 today. Just pages 2 through 5, choosing people for the labels. And we're currently in version 21.18.2. If you have questions throughout the webinar, you can type them into the questions panel and I'll either answer them as I go if I can, or I'll come back to them all at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and dive right in. We're going to click on membership, open up the membership module, and right here in the middle of the screen we have a nice quick access labels button. You can also go up to Reports Export at the top of the screen and then click Reports and Labels and then choose Labels. Each of the specific reports also have labels choices, but today we're just going to be talking about general labels from this main labels screen that you get right here. When we click that labels button, it opens up this screen called Step 1. Select who should have labels printed. And that who part is the most important thing to remember when you're thinking about the two different steps of labels or reports. The Step 1 is always going to be selecting who appears on the labels. And it's not until Step 2 that we get to choose what those labels look like. So the first thing we have, if we just start from the top left corner, we have these 4 different tabs, and we're going to start with the People tab. The first thing we can do on the People tab is select a membership field, and that means any of the fields in the membership module. You scroll through this list, you can see they're in alphabetical order. I'm going real fast, but it's all the fields that are available in the membership records for people. So for example, maybe we only want labels for folks with a particular status code. If we either scroll through the list or you can type in the box, we can choose something like status code, and then we get some choices. Maybe we only want to print labels for active and associate members and not any of our other types of statuses. We would put check marks by those and press the Add to Selection button. And that pops it right down into the bottom portion of the screen. We can build more complex criteria by using "and" to say that they have to meet this status code criteria and an additional criteria. Or we could use the "or" button to say they have to have either this status code or an additional criteria. And then you have parentheses to build even more complicated criteria, but that is discussed in a separate video. If you want to take a look at that, you can go to our website and look up using parentheses or look up report queries. And you should find some information about using these "and", "or", and parentheses to create more complex search criteria. If we look up to the top right-hand corner now, we have options for the giver numbers. We can choose to only print labels for those with a number. To do that, we would uncheck include those without number. Or vice versa, we could print only labels for those without a number. And when we do that, you can see it gets rid of these other two choices for the giver number range and the named range. And that's because it's not relevant if we're not printing for people with numbers. If I did want to just print for those with numbers, I could also only print a certain range of numbers. Maybe I only want to print labels for my givers who have giver numbers between 1 and 50. I could do that just by typing 50 as the maximum number. And X's will always clear out whatever you typed and change it back to the original. This named range can be used, for example, here you see 200 through 250 are named children's envelopes. So if you have certain envelope numbers that are assigned to specific people, you can set up named ranges to help you run reports and labels more quickly based on those number ranges. I'm going to go ahead and include both those with and without numbers, though. Moving along, below that we have categories. These are our members and our visitors. So if we want members only, we would uncheck visitors. You can also add additional categories. Maybe you have a category for out-of-town people or something like that. Those other categories that you add would be available here as well. Continuing down, we have this little include box where we could choose to print labels for inactive people. We're not going to do that, and most of the time with labels, you wouldn't need to do that. Membership groups refers to any groups and classes that you've set up. Donations individual givers and donations group givers both have asterisks next to them, which point to this little note here. These are not limited by membership field selections. What that means is that donations individuals and donations groups are people who exist only in donations. And so all of these membership criteria over here don't apply to those donations people because they don't have any of that membership information. They're a different type of person than a member or a visitor. They exist only in donations. So that's what that's referring to. I'm going to go ahead and clear the search criteria. Now, before I do that, if I had created a more complex criteria, let's say I put in these status codes and I said they have to have one of those codes or they have to have, let's say, directory report order of primary or secondary. So they either have to have that status code or they have to have a primary or secondary directory report order. So that's a slightly more complex criteria. If I'm going to use that a lot and I don't want to have to put it in every time, I can use saved selections at the bottom of the screen. Saved selections. To do that, I click that little floppy disk button that I just circled, and it asks me to name my saved selection. So I could say whatever I wanted to name this so I could come back and use it again. Maybe let's call it active members. Maybe that's how I decide if someone is an active member by their status or their directory report order. Now I have that option down here in my drop-down, and I could run that same report anytime just by choosing it without having to re-enter those criteria every time. The next thing we're going to look at is the next tab back up across the top of the screen. So that was everything on the People tab. Next, we have Giving, Pledging. So here I could choose only to print labels for those who gave, or I can leave it on all. I can choose a specific giving range. Maybe I only want to see people who gave more than $100, or people who gave between $100 and $500. By unchecking this no upper limit box, I can limit only to people who gave within a certain amount range. Or I could print for only those who did not give. And again, we have an and or choice in the middle. So I could say only those who gave or only those who pledged, and then it would grab anybody who did either of those things or both of those things. So the or does include if people did both things, not necessarily just one or the other. And then with the pledging, you can also choose a range or only those who did not pledge. You can also limit it by the type of pledge, whether the frequency of their pledging is a single gift or a repeat. And then you have check marks for people who have met or have not met all pledges. The receive statement include box up here is, in this case, if we wanted to only print labels for people who do receive a statement, we could say receive statement, or only those who do not receive a statement. But most of the time you're going to leave that as all. Same with this gives with family. If you wanted to print only labels for people who give alone, you could say does not give with family. Or if you wanted to print only labels for people who do give with their family, you could choose that. But we'll leave it as all. Now you also have a date range here. So if you wanted to see, for example, people who gave within the last 2 years, you could change this date range back to January 1st, 2017 and go all the way through the end of this year. You also have these minus YR and plus YR buttons that will increase or decrease the entire range by 1 year. So if I keep it on just this calendar year and hit minus YR, everything jumps back a year. And underneath the date range, we have use numbers current as of. So if you're printing labels right now, today, December 5th, for the numbers that you've assigned people that start January 1st, you could change this date to January 1st, 2019, and then the numbers that would print on the labels would be the new numbers, not the current numbers. So that's helpful if you're trying to print labels for a specific giver number that you've assigned to people that hasn't started yet. You want to use this use numbers current as of box. Next, we have the Accounts tab. Here we could choose to only print labels for people who gave to a particular campaign for our pledgers, or only people who gave to specific accounts. Maybe we only want to see people who gave to the missions fund. We could just double click, or you can click on the item to highlight it and use the arrow buttons in the middle of the screen to move things back and forth. So this Accounts tab goes in combination with the Giving Pledging tab. So if you're only wanting those who gave, if you go to the Accounts tab, you can also say only those who gave to a particular account. Otherwise, if we don't do anything on the Accounts tab and we leave it like this, all accounts will be selected. That would mean our selections from Giving Pledging of only those who gave or only those who pledged, etc., either apply to all accounts or the account that you specifically choose. The final tab we have is the Sort tab. And this tab allows us to choose what order the labels print in. Now, a lot of times folks think that this tab will determine what text gets put on the labels, but it doesn't. So you don't want to come over here and tell it, okay, well, I want the name on the first line and then the address on the second line and then, continuing down. That's not what this tab will do. This is going to tell it strictly how to sort people. So for example, we could tell it to sort by zip code for field 1 and then by name for field 2. Now we have 3 name choices: family name, last first, last family first, and last first alphabetical. The family refers to whoever is the primary person in the family, their last name. So if spouses have different last names, you can use these 2 family choices to be more specific about how it sorts. Most of the time, the last first alphabetical is what we want. So if I set sort field 1 to zip code and sort field 2 to name, then when I print, it's going to group the labels based on the zip codes, and then within each zip code, it will be alphabetical order. And then the reset sort button will just take it back to the default, which is to sort by name in alphabetical order. So that covers all of the label selections for step 1, selecting who appears on the labels. Thank you for coming today to the webinar and watching. If you have any questions, go ahead and type them in and I'll stick around. But that concludes today's topic. Thank you again for attending. If you don't have any questions, feel free to sign out. Otherwise, I'll stick around and answer any questions that come in. And join us in a couple of weeks for the second step of labels, where we determine what they're going to look like and what text actually gets printed on those labels. Thanks again. Any other questions about our label search criteria? Okay, thanks again, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and close the room. If you are typing a question, just hit enter, even if you're not finished typing, so that I don't shut down before you get your question out. And I'll wait another couple minutes, and then I'll go ahead and close the session. Thanks, everyone.